I think we can all agree when it comes to introductory press conferences, they are tricky because everybody's feeling good, man.
As you say, you know who famously won their introductory press conference, and everyone was ready for him to be here for 7 years, was Matt Rule.
Yes.
So you can be fooled at the opening press conference. And, it goes the other way too, right? Like we had the Nick Sirianni, although he wanted to play Rochambeau with people. And, we were like, this guy's never going to win anything. 2 years later, he's in the Super Bowl.
Now he's going through it right now because they missed on coordinators after key guys left the Philadelphia Eagles after the Super Bowl. And then, of course, there's the prime example of Dan Campbell ripped by the media for his I'm eating kneecaps and I'm getting back up and everything else. But
he's a meathead. Yeah.
But
he is.
It's obviously paid off because the team has taken on this identity, this all grit mentality, and it's worked out for him. I'm not just doing this to be contrarian. What I actually see out of the Carolina Panthers and what they've done so far gives me optimism that the third time is the charm for David Tepper. I know the trendy thing is to rip David Tepper. I am not saying I'm never going to rip David Tepper again because old habits do die hard for guys like that. They kind of are who they are at this point. But my key takeaway from this press conference and the hires that have gone along with Dave Canales as the head coach screams to me something that you and I have talked about since Matt Rule got hired. And even when Frank Reich got hired. When Matt Rule got hired, what was your biggest beef? Bring your guys with you. Instead, it was, man, I didn't even know Joe Brady. I just know Joe Brady was the hot name.
I've never met him.
And we're supposed to work together.
This is your dream job, and you're trusting it to someone you've never met before. So, yeah, when Dan Morgan has a background with Canales, and a shout out to Mike Kay. I believe he was the first to have this. Yes. There was a picture from the sideline from week 18 when the Bucs and Panthers were playing. And he said, if Dan Morgan gets the job, as some people are speculating, then you can expect Canales to be the coach that he does hire.
The same thing happened with Frank Reich. They bragged about their multi-million-dollar coaching staff, all the years of experience, the dream team. And while Frank Reich is a football lifer, that doesn't necessarily mean he's worked with some of those guys. And ultimately, it led to that Joe Person report.
Or trusts them or wants to hear their input.
That's the thing. So it gets to that Joe Person report. They did the post-mortem on the Frank Reich firing, and it was described as Hunger Games. And you had these various factions. You'll remember going back to a Jonathan Jones CBS report in the middle of the season where they wanted to simplify things for Bryce Young. Now, that got aggregated as though Bryce Young didn't understand NFL speeding concepts. No. It was about hearing way too many different philosophies about how to go stuff.
Well, we have a play caller, and I'm going to turn it over to him, and it was always the plan to turn it over.
But now it's not 3 weeks later.
After we actually won a game.
So there was all sorts of weird messaging that took place, which led to that Hunger Games environment. So everything that I've heard coming from the Dan Morgan hire to Dave Canales as being the head coach to the offensive coordinator who was the passing game guy, with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, all these types of things. The key phrase that came out of today's press conference was alignment. That was used multiple times in this press conference, multiple times.
Ultimately, the success of Canales comes down to how does he handle David Tepper? Because we can sit here and hit rewind. I did not have a problem with the Frank Reich hire, but ultimately it didn't work because he clearly and quickly couldn't handle David Tepper. And from the very jump, calling him Mr. Tepper, for God's sake, as a 62-year-old grown-ass man. Now, if Canales is calling him Mr. Tepper, all right, there's a sign of respect there. You're a 62-year-old man who's been in this league and won the Super Bowl and done all these other things. You have your own thing, man.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that.
Which, by the way, played itself out quickly. Cool. David Tepper doesn't know anything about football.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not how he made his money. And while I appreciate the fact that he is the one putting the money into the investment, there are things that you have to understand that you don't know and that there are people who do. So having a Monday meeting every week and like trying to break down plays and trying to break down footwork and whatever else he's been trying to do, you have to understand that you kind of have to remove yourself from a situation and realize kind of like both ways, right? Sometimes you say, well, we don't know what Bryce Young is.
Sure.
I think we know what he isn't, right? So David Tepper needs to realize what he isn't. He isn't like this brilliant football mind. And you have to listen to the people who are and that you trust. And there has to be in Canales' role, that head coaching role, or there has to be another intermediary that says to David Tepper, let the coach do his job. Let the GM do his job. I don't want to see David Tepper at the draft this year in the room saying, Chandler Zavala wasn't at the combine.
Yeah.
He texted me, let's take him.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? Or the receiver that they all rolled their eyes at for taking the receiver that they could have gotten not there. Like these are the kind of things like he has to remove himself from. Do I think he did the right thing here and going with the current template, the flavor of the month of what the NFL is going through right now, a play caller and what he did with Baker Mayfield. Hell, man, anything he did with Geno Smith, we should be like, somebody made Geno Smith into a functional quarterback. Like, you should get all kinds of credit for that.
Yeah.
But again, there has to be a little bit of a separation of church and state.
It's not lost on me. And I say this knowing full damn well that you can get too caught up in an introductory press conference. Okay.
Yeah.
But David Tepper was very, very quick on the stage today. Did not spend a lot of time. He's like, hey, I'm here. Cool.
It's not about me today.
Really,
which is fine.
Really excited to bring these guys on. So let's do it. Let's just get them up here. Right.
Yeah.
And to your point about handling it, I do think that the hiring of Dan Morgan, if you watched any of today's press conference and you get to know more about Dan Morgan does not look like a guy that's going to sit here and try to, butter you up.
Right.
As everybody who's ever been around Dan Morgan will tell you, he is a straight shooter. He is the embodiment of football. Dan Morgan talked about it today. I want dogs. No. We want dogs.
Oh, okay.
That's what we want. I want dogs. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for dogs. And Canales, the way he talks, is also the embodiment of football. The hiring of Brant Tillis from Kansas City, also as the executive president or whatever fancy title they're giving him, looks like they're actually trying to pattern themselves.
Giving us an intermediary.
Yes, pattern themselves over things that we've seen in San Francisco, things that we've seen in Denver, things that we've seen, I think, in Seattle as well. So it looks like when they say alignment, it's an easy buzzword to say, but it looks like the pieces that they're putting together do follow that basically that philosophy of we're all in alignment. We've all known each other. We all know what we want. And it's not going to be that weird Hunger Games stuff. But I agree with you. How do you handle Tepper? But you got to remember, Tepper's got to be able to handle himself. Yeah. Otherwise, nothing changes. It remains the same. Like Woody Johnson was in the news this week because of a Diana Rossini deep dive on the New York Jets and everything that went wrong. Remember when I joked about David Tepper showing Frank Reich Bryce Young footwork on social media? Like, I bet you, I know he has a burner account. The only question is David Tepper going the length of taking his phone in a meeting and showing it to the coach saying, well, why is Bryce doing this? Because this, Panther fan Roar 85 says that his footwork sucks. Right. I made a joke. Woody Johnson was actually doing that with the Jets. He was going on social media, looking at Jets fans, some guy from Islip complaining about the Jets, and going to the coaching staff and saying, hey, why is this happening? That actually happened. So hopefully David Tepper doesn't do any of that crap.